Hey guys, welcome back, it's Ripe again. In today's video, my terrible homeowner association towed my RV from my farm unlawfully and claimed that it violated their HOA bylaws. The only problem is, I am not part of this HOA. Here is what happened. So I love being a farmer, but I will admit that there are a couple of negative sides to things. For one, it means that I never really got to see much of the world outside my small town due to the constant work. I never really saw that as a bad thing until a few years ago when I got a cancer diagnosis. I was lucky that it was early and I did not even need to get chemo or anything too aggressive and serious. It did make me realize though that my entire life was stuck on the farm and I wanted to make some changes. I spent some money I'd been saving up to buy a big RV so that I could go with my family on some adventures. I had plenty of help around the farm so that it would be able to survive without me a couple of times a year. I also could just park the RV right on the farm, which too was a bonus. Plus my kids loved it and before we even went anywhere always wanted to go inside and pretend like they were camping out in it. I honestly wish I was writing a story about a cool vacation, but it actually has to do with the HOA that invaded our neighborhood a while back and how me getting the RV seemed to have set them off. It would not be the first time that they were annoyed at me either. Every couple of years they felt like making sure I did not forget about them and how much they hated me. According to them, I was always breaking one rule or another, and before you wonder, I don't know if I was actually breaking any, since I was not a member of the HOA and did not know or care about what they had in the rules. Fights in the past had to do with animals, fences and other boring things you can imagine. For this though, they were interested in using the RV as a fighting point and this time taking things way too far. When the president noticed that I had the RV parked on my farm, it did not take long before she accidentally ran into me to talk. Like who knew I would be in my own yard, right? What am I, like a farmer or something? HOA person. Are you holding that for a friend or something? Me holding what? HOA, that huge ugly monstrosity. She pointed at the RV. Well, I bought it actually, it's all mine. I was happy already just at the knowledge that she was upset with it. Amazing purchase before I even put a mile on it. HOA, oh no, we have strict and firm rules against having campers and the like on properties. It gives a bad image to the neighborhood and people will think we are low-class rednecks or something. Me, how many times do we need to have the same song and dance? You know damn well I'm not part of the HOA and I don't need to follow your rules. HOA person, but it affects all the people around you that are members and pay good money to have the neighborhood be nice. Me, and yet the only comments I got aside from you were positive. You can bark until you're blue in the face, but at the end of the day, the RV is not going anywhere and I'm not wasting my time listening to you. I have work to do. Some of us do it for a living. I just had to get that extra jab because she brags about the HOA being her job and not needing to really work like it's a good thing. I'm not saying I want everybody to work until they collapse, but I do believe hard work is good for people. That's the first time I truly spoke my mind to her as I had my new idea of life and arguing was not part of that. She could see that I was not gonna play her games, so she chose to change things up. I woke up to the RV gone and a note in my mailbox that it has been towed for being in violation of the HOA guidelines. She wanted to get a rise out of me and while I was mad, I was not gonna give it to her. I stayed calm instead and called the number on the letter to get it back. It turned out to be a junkyard and they'd been informed if it broken down and having a gas leak or something. I can't remember the exact reasoning they gave, but basically whatever she told them caused them to scrap it. Yes, they crushed and destroyed a brand new RV that did not even get a chance to be used. I was a little mad at them, but knew that I should be focusing my energy on the right person, and that was the HOA. I took her to court for towing and destroying my RV and stood there telling the truth. That I was not an HOA member and it was not illegal for me to own the RV and park it on my property where it wasn't doing any damages. Of course, she had a huge argument about how it was destroying the neighborhood and blah blah, plus the lies about it having a gas leak and being a danger to everybody because it could explode. When asked for any evidence that showed a new RV being in that bad shape, she had nothing. She assumed the court would take her word just like the towing company did. That is not how the system works and the judge found in favor of me. She would need to give me the money I spent in order to get a new RV. That was not the end though, because she did technically steal something of a large value. Theft is a crime, and while nobody's going to jail for stealing gum from a store, an RV is expensive and different. With a not so hard judge, she might have gotten the charge reduced enough to get off with a warning or community service. This guy was not soft at all though, and actually gave her jail time for misusing her power as HOA president and for stealing my RV. It was nice to see the justice system doing some harsh punishments to the HOA. When she gets out, I'll be happy to flaunt my new RV right in her face with the money we were able to get, an even bigger one than before. Also, she won't be able to do a damn thing about it next time because she will have a criminal record and no power over anything. The HOA was swearing up and down that she worked alone and they did not know a thing about the RV and what she did. Since there was no proof that she worked through the HOA, they did get to continue operating, but they had to be careful. Another incident involving a president could just cause the entire thing to get forcefully disbanded. A week after all of that, we finally went on vacation in the RV and got to see the world outside of the farm for the first time, but I can promise not the last. And yeah, Ripe Stars, if you still enjoy these HOA stories, then please don't forget to like the video and maybe even subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Thank you so much. And now let's continue with the next story, which is a malicious compliance story. When I was around 19, I was working as a receptionist front of house at a solicitor's office. It was quite small but very successful. 4 partners, main one was a lady it was named after, who was kind of fierce in a Judge Judy kind of way, so I will call her Judy. A new solicitor we will call Anna joined the team. We had a conveyancing, a personal injury, financial and criminal department solicitor, and she would be working family law, and her speciality and main focus would be helping domestic violence victims. At this time, all of the abused clients were women. She was awesome at her job, and I saw so many victims of abuse while they waited in reception, and because they were so stressed and worried, they would sometimes just tell me their life stories while they waited. I did my best to comfort them. Sometimes they would have to wait an hour or longer if something else was happening. Anna advocated hard for these women: restraining orders, emergency hearings, police interviews, protection, arranging safe houses, custody of children. I really admired her and still do now. Those women needed her. The thing about Anna was she was extremely posh, well-educated, she spoke better than the characters on Downton Abbey or even the Queen, but she was also very opinionated and she swore a lot. Hearing her talk about one of the husbands of a battered woman, what an absolute twatting little idiot, in a voice that sounds similar to the Queen, made us giggle, but she reined it in and was mostly professional in front of clients. Most of my job was filing, typing, voice dictation statements and logging calls from the women with restraining orders who had been contacted by their ex-partner/abuser. So I would get a lot of calls like, "Hi Sabrina, he called me at 8:15 AM and 10 AM today, also an email at 9 PM through his mom's account." Things like that. It all had to be logged and reported for the court files. I get so many of these calls that I'd recognize each by voice, which is important later. After she'd been there for maybe a month, she was featured in an article that put the office in a very good light. The article highlighted her important work in keeping these people safe, and we celebrated with her. But it went to her head and she became arrogant and snappy, with little put-downs here to the secretaries and other workers. She became pretty full of herself, getting snarky and barking out "coffee" to me as soon as she walked inside. So I let it go. She was stressed and doing something important, as it was so long ago most documents had to be faxed. Her office was 2 doors away from reception. She would let me know if she was expecting something important, and I would drop everything to rush the documents to her. Waiting for legal stuff, police reports or restraining orders could quite literally be a life and death situation for the clients. Sure enough, a restraining order document came through for a female client who was sitting with Anna in her office. She was crying, looked like she had no sleep, her story was horrendous. I had to type up some statements of hers, and I felt desperately sorry for her. The rule was, if something important came through, I had to rush and interrupt any client meeting. The papers came through, I rushed to the office and handed them to Anna and then left. Moments later, Anna was in reception screeching at me because the timestamp said it was delivered a whole hour earlier. I was confused. I'd given it to her the moment it came through. She wouldn't stop yelling that I had put this woman's life in jeopardy over my laziness and stupidity, and I should be fired. She made so much noise that Judy came out of her office to listen, the founder of the company. Her face gave absolutely nothing away, and afterwards she quietly just said, "Please make sure to give the documents quickly in future to avoid any more problems." It happened again though. An 8 or so page document came through for that same client who was in there with her. I rushed her to her office, handed them to her, and went to leave. Before I could, Anna started yelling at me again. "This was an hour ago." "What the F, Sabrina? What the F did I tell you?" This time she started swearing and I couldn't get a word in, and all of this in front of the poor client who looked wildly uncomfortable. Judy came to the door again and her face gave nothing away and just asked me to come with her. She asked if there was a problem, I explained and she thanked me. Anna then followed us out and started yelling at me that I had no respect or kindness in my heart for these women and I was lazy, utterly incompetent and ridiculous, not right in the head. I cried in the toilets. Over the next few days the same client came in, things had escalated further and had hit the newspapers. It was an awful case, so the 4 partners along with Anna were meeting with her in the same office. I then went back in to give a file to one of the other partners there and Anna piped up and said, "Was this from an hour ago too? There seems to be a pattern here." Again in front of the client and her 4 bosses. It did not bother me this time though. I had one of those moments in bed the night before, the moment when your eyes snap open while you are trying to sleep and you have that bingo realization moment. So I calmly just said, "The reason why the documents appeared to be an hour late was because the clocks have changed for daylight savings time. I should have realized that when the ink was still not dry as I handed them to you." Sure enough, the document on her desk yesterday was a little smudged. The fax machine was old and did not update the time. My little victory moment was spoiled because as I was leaving the office I tripped over my own foot and knocked my head on the door frame, giving Anna a good laugh. The next day, a staff meeting was called about professionalism in the office. The client who witnessed Anna's meltdown had approached Judy. She was really upset to see Anna treat the staff that way and her swearing had frightened her. Judy was very clear that this was not acceptable. The woman had heard enough yelling and swearing for a lifetime. Anna begrudgingly apologized to me and I just shrugged it off. Judy also apologized privately for not stepping in when she should have. No problem, my malicious compliance was next. Every single call I had to log instead of the main list I used on the computer from the women I wrote on an individual post-it. So I would be in and out of her office sometimes 10 times an hour. Her desk was flooded with post-its that just said, "10 AM call from husband to client X." She was annoyed, but this was what she asked for. And yes, I wasted a lot of post-its. The next bit got a little strange though. A lady who was in a shelter/safe house with her daughter called and said that she was reconciling with her husband and she wants to drop the case completely and did not want to be contacted again. This happens, sometimes abused victims go back when it gets too much. This was a particularly brutal case. She had been beaten really badly. I told Anna straight away, who said she would call her in a few days. Calling right then might jeopardize her safety if he was there, and I said no, call the police. She asked why and I said it was not her on the phone. I recognize her voice every time she calls and it wasn't her. So we called for a welfare check and sure enough her husband had taken her forcefully back home and had his older daughter call the office pretending to be her. He was arrested thankfully. When it all worked out well and the lady was again in a much better safe house, Anna gifted me a bottle of wine and a thank you card and then asked me to stop with the post-its and that the message was received. She also apologized again properly. And the next one is an Am I the A-hole story. My wife has a high-paying job and earns significantly more than I do. I work as a teacher and make around 40k, while she works in the private sector and makes 300 to 400k after tax. We split our finances equitably, with her paying 70% to my 30%. A little background, her parents both immigrated to this country, so she and her sisters could succeed in life and now all have very high-paying jobs, one working in tech and the other one being a surgeon. Meanwhile, my parents work government jobs and my sister lives on benefits, so we are a relatively low-income family. My wife did help my younger sister when she became a single mom at a young age by offering her a secretary job at her office, but my sister quit after a month as she found it too difficult. Which I can understand, as she was raising a baby on her own. Recently her parents retired and she and her sister give them around $2,000 every month, which I find ridiculous. They have pensions, why do they need 6k? She assured me this money doesn't come out of our joint account. However, when I brought it up, my parents were also retired and could use the help. She told me that if I could afford to send it from my own salary, then I should. I was shocked and angry. My parents only had me to depend on while her sisters made a lot of money, so her parents would be fine either way. My wife told her parents sacrificed a lot by moving to this country. It's her responsibility and my parents should be my responsibility. She says I'm being an a-hole for asking her to support my parents when she has never put pressure towards me for not contributing more to our household. We had a similar argument before about loaning my sister some money to put a down payment on her house, but my wife said she would not use her money as she thinks my sister is unreliable and won't pay her back. I just don't understand how she can be so cheap because she earns so much more than me. So, Reddit, am I the a-hole for asking my wife to support my family? And here, ripe stars, let me know in the comments what you think about this. A comment on Reddit said, did you all catch his comment stating that his wife does the majority of household tasks and parenting? You are the a-hole, sir. Maybe you should go move in and care for your elderly parents to see what it's like to work a job and then come home and have to work even more. Comment number 2, you are the a-hole not for asking but for refusing to accept her answer. She is right that she doesn't have an obligation to your parents and you don't have an obligation to hers. Comment number 3, you are the a-hole, your entitlement is absolutely incredible and yes, I would feel the same way if the genders were reversed. It sounds like your sister especially is an irresponsible freeloader. Update to the story, a lot of you are asking why parents need help when they have a pension. Well, my dad has Parkinson's and his condition is only gonna get worse. My mom is not strong enough to help with his diaper, etc. The only option is to put him in a care home and separate the two of them because we cannot afford a live-in carer. This is frustrating to me as my wife knows all of this and her parents are in great health currently. Her offering money would no way break her bank but would help my parents a lot. I just think she's being selfish because if the roles were reversed, I would help her. Edit number 2, copying my comment here, I didn't expect this post to blow up. Just to address the elephant in the room, I can see that I'm being an a-hole and I love and appreciate my wife a lot. I'll speak to my sister about moving in my parents, like many of you suggested. However, there's not much I can do about my job. I'm almost 48 and work for the PE department at a crappy secondary school. I cannot just quit and make similar amounts to my wife who works in private equity and has multiple rental properties under her name. This post has been kind of a slap in the face and I fully expected everyone to tell me that I'm not the a-hole, but it turns out that I am. I guess it's been an emotional situation with my father, his health has been declining, and I have felt helpless to be honest, and when I found my wife can comfortably help her parents, I feel a bit betrayed and hurt. I agree that it's not her responsibility to help, but I've had sleepless nights imagining my dad at a care home, reading horror stories, and I guess I just expected my wife to be a bit more empathetic. But I agree that they are my parents, they are my responsibility. I've listened to the replies and will start looking for more remote tutor jobs so I can pick up the slack and bond more with my daughter. A part of me wants to delete this post so my wife never finds this, but I think it will keep it as a good reminder for the future. I would also like to say, my wife has very expensive taste. We live in a house that I can by no means afford with my salary. We go on multiple holidays, which I can also chip in, and my wife likes expensive presents, which I have to save up for. Even with my salary, I don't have much in my savings, and that's something I will need to talk to my wife about. And now let's move on to the next story. It starts like this. I'm going to start by saying I live in a small town that gets a lot of snow over the winter, making already narrow and dangerous rural roads damn near impossible to get through, and that is if you're lucky. I thought I was being a good Samaritan, a good neighbor, by plowing some of the snow away, although most of it was on my own land, just so my wife and I could get our cars out without slipping into a ditch or tree. We went to a public meeting last winter to ask if they could send someone to deal with the snow quickly piling up, and were met dismissively with suggestions to rent a snowmobile during the harder months or walk if absolutely necessary. I saw no reason to go to such extremes when I knew I could manage it by myself. It's not like we could afford to stay at home over the winter, and our jobs were not so close that we had the luxury of walking to them from way out here in the sticks. The work was hard and the snow was heavy, but I managed to keep at least one portion of the driveway and roads cleared to allow us to reach the nearby town and rest of the outside world. One day after spending hours clearing the drive, I left with the car to pick up my son from town, finding the road ahead blocked by someone working for the HOA.
I stopped to ask what was going on, and they said they were told to install a road bump on our land. It made it hard to access my house now by road and damn near impossible for my son with his disability. As soon as I came back, I spent the evening digging the thing back up. The next morning, I called up a representative of the HOA to give them a piece of my mind, and what followed 2 weeks later was a letter outlining that this policy would stay and cars found on closed roads would be subject to further fines. No apology was given for the trouble or stress the incident caused our family. With no clear desire or interest in meeting us halfway or accommodating to our family's needs, I decided to keep clearing the high tides of snow from the road, and we continued to use the road in our daily lives, unaware of what was coming next. Despite our protests, the HOA continued to insist on the use of snowmobiles for transport in favor of our usual vehicles in the winter months, firmly stating that the roads should remain snowed over even on private property, listing off various reasons which I did not really care to believe. I just thought they were doing it because they were stubborn and did not like us much after the commotion we had tried to raise earlier. It was early February when the snow began to melt, but that's not where our problems stopped. A thick envelope arrived hand-delivered from an express courier, quickly ripping it open to reveal a stack of bills and a strongly worded letter that spanned 2 whole pages. In summary, the HOA had been recording the complaints we had made and cited us with a number of violations with a hefty fine to back it up, which they assured us was legally binding. The violations ranged from weird to ridiculous: harassment of HOA personnel, plowing roads without authorization, and the use of closed roads without permit. From day one, I spent long hours on calls to their representatives to try and get the fines removed, or at least reduced to what seemed like an unfair rule on their part. Seeing as they somehow felt they had the sole rights to the roads to and from my house, able to block me in or out of it at their leisure. They did not take kindly to this criticism, however, and despite negotiations starting calm, their inadequacies and inability to cooperate or show the slightest hints of sympathy or empathy made me mad, as if they did not understand what the whole deal was. When I refused to meet their demands, I was approached by police officers the next evening, telling me that the fines were legal and had to be paid soon. With little options left to me, I called a lawyer and decided to file charges against the HOA, hoping that a jury would understand my situation and overrule them. Days passed into weeks as the trial continued. The fees were becoming too much, but still a fraction of what had been demanded of me. And then, on that final and fated day, I found myself fall deeply into disappointment and despair. The HOA had hired a team of expert lawyers and hounded us through most of the trial. A classic David and Goliath scenario, except this time Goliath won. The jury and judge agreed to side with the HOA, and I was ordered to pay total fees of $41,500 or face time in jail. I had no fight left to give at that point and fell into a long depression. A second mortgage on the house got me the money for the fees, and I tried not to do anything to upset them further, keeping my car off the road for the while. My son was homeschooled, unable to walk to catch a bus, and my wife was put on leave until it was resolved. I even contemplated quitting my job, now unable to leave my house. My wife, however, was not done with the fight. She insisted that it was too soon to just roll over and that we had suffered enough. Although I did not have much hope at the time, we took our story public and soon found ourselves overwhelmed with support from other homeowners, both from the local towns and other states with their own troubles with local housing authority. Through what we can only call a miracle, the debt we had ended up in was paid off after a surge of generous donations that only brought more attention to our cause. Once it was picked up by the news, it had gone completely viral, with many angry voices demanding for a retrial. As the first snow of a new winter began, the HOA was found guilty of misconduct and abuse of power, and the judge ordered it to be disbanded after clearing us of all charges. I went back to plowing my own roads again, and I could not be happier. We won.
And with this, we have reached the end of the video. However, if you cannot get enough of my content, please check out my endless playlist, where you can find thousands of hours of content. In addition, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel to not miss any of my daily uploads. Thank you so much in advance, and I hope to see you again tomorrow.